On this week's episode of the RAG podcast, I was joined by Matt Halsey. Matt was the CEO and founder of a recruitment brand called Create and Adapt and another brand called Canda. These are recruitment businesses but with a modern twist. They are built on being on-site with the client, disrupting the pricing model, and really caring about how to solve the problem for organizations as opposed to just making fees. Matt was an agency recruiter, then he went in-house, then he fell out of love with recruitment and business altogether and was going to start a coffee shop. But in the end, he felt that talent acquisition was something he loved, and he did feel like he could add value to organizations. His freelance startup gig turned into hiring people and winning global accounts like Starbucks. And now he's focused on offering a service that really does solve major recruitment problems for businesses. So it's everything from a recruitment on-site model, but also implementing new ATS systems, working out how to build candidate pools, employer branding, talent websites, a full piece of both advertising and traditional recruitment. A genuinely honest guy, a really nice guy. You can tell his business has grown organically and he's kind of learned so much along the way. He was very open about things that he's made mistakes and messed up with. But one thing about him now is he's so passionate about doing recruitment differently. And he said anyone listening to this show or anyone he comes across, if they want to start a recruitment business and not do it exactly how they always have, get in touch with him. So he's got some really super innovative ideas and he's thinking differently than a lot of people. So I hope you really enjoy this episode. Without further ado, Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here.
It's good to have you in.
Thank you very much for having me.
No problem at all. It was only, a week or two ago I saw you at the expo?
Very much. First time we met.
Yeah.
Saw you in your elements.
I know, I feel like you've come to me in loads of different ways. So I've seen something about you on LinkedIn, and then I reached out and said, I really like the look of your business. Then we bumped into each other at the expo. Then I was speaking to someone who's got a business part. I feel like you're everywhere right now, but a month ago I'd never heard of you.
Yeah, it's like the ginger beard. It's the curse. Everyone remembers the beard, and then it's kind of once you've heard about it, it's just everywhere.
The beard just doesn't leave you. Right, well,
pretty much.
Look, I've given you an intro, Matt, but I'd rather you do it justice. So can you give the listeners a little overview of who you are, what you do?
Yep, so I'm Matt Halsey. I am founder and CEO of Create and Adapt Limited. We are I suppose a challenger to the disruption in recruitment on how you can apply different processes, payment structures, and ways of working to service traditional hiring models. We've basically been going for 4 years, and it's just been amazing about how much we are learning and iterating on what it is that the problem is we're actually working on. What we thought was the problem 4 years ago is no longer what we're actually doing today.
Right, so a recruitment business focused on solving a problem rather than just trying to make you money.
Yeah, it sounds quite altruistic, and I think this is the thing.
Sounds rare. No, I love it.
Yeah, no, it's the biggest problem I personally have. So I started in like most people, fell into recruitment, did it for 5 years, earned really good money. I realized money didn't necessarily make me happy, didn't give me the fulfillment I wanted. I then joined corporates, big PLCs. Equally got frustrated, found that there was like lots of bureaucracy, but learned a lot. And then I kind of stepped back from it and thought, I'm just going to get away from email. I hated Outlook. I hated Microsoft. It was killing me at the time. And I was like,
Did you get days like that though? But you had a proper period of that.
I think I just like fell out of love with the whole kind of going to work, sitting at a screen. I thought there was something else. And my kind of alter ego was like, I'm going to go and set up a coffee shop. Like, forget emails, forget all this stuff.
You do look like you own a coffee shop.
I know.
Have you got a coffee shop?
I don't have one. There's a business plan.
You should have one.
There's a business plan. There's a brand.
Let me know. I'll be there.
I've still not quite got there to set it up.
So before we go into it, though, you did work in recruitment, but you did agency and in-house, right?
Correct, yeah.
So how long did you do each?
5 years in agency, and then probably about 6-7 years in-house, wow, give or take.
And what did you... Well, this is a whole different podcast on its own, but like, what was the major difference when you went in-house, would you say?
Do you know that the perception of what people wanted from a recruitment business and what I put pressure on myself to do in an agency, or what our directors put pressure on, was completely the opposite when I was in-house. The value, it wasn't about how much they were paying. It wasn't about speed. It was all about like, how are we going to fill this really difficult job with credible people, and what problem is it going to solve that business? And this ranged anything from CFOs, buyers, software engineers, everything. And I remember being in there and I was just fascinated by the business. I was the person that was asking like a million questions, and I'd go and sit in front of the CEO of this PLC retailer. It was WH Smith at the time. And I remember like Kate Swan on the board and all these people just talking about hiring challenges they needed. And I was fascinated by it.
Yeah.
And at no point did they say, we need to work with that agency at that percentage. It just wasn't even a consideration. No. So it just gave me a completely different perception of it all.
I would say, having now been on the other side, so we're growing our business and we've got plans to triple actually this year if all hit.
Congrats.
If we hit, I mean, it's a plan. But I think we've got a good chance of doubling towards tripling. But when it comes to all them years I spent in agency, and I completely agree. Now I'm looking at the other side, and I mean the terms, of course, we're a small business. We're going to look at fees and stuff, but I just want to talk to someone that actually gives a shit about what I'm saying. Like, I want an agent who's not going to just take a job spec and run away. I want them to actually ask good questions, someone that I could imagine is going to help me get to where I want to get to. Because actually, recruitment's a process that is just to get me somewhere else, right? It's to grow that. It's to grow the business, not just for that individual transaction.
Well, it's even the term like agent that in itself has strange connotations. And like you want a person, you want somebody who's going to be able to go and represent Hoxo, and you want someone who's going to say, I'm going to find somebody who's going to change your business for the better. And what's that worth?
Yeah.
And finding people isn't the challenge. It's kind of like, it's the art and the love of the person who's really going to put the dedication in to
Did
find that person.
Did you find when you were, and this is just some of my own personal shit that I don't know. So apologies if listeners don't give a shit, but I'm going to ask.
We can edit it, right?
No, we don't edit it. But did you find it was harder or easier or more fun or whatever when you're working on one company? Because I've never really sat there and, other than Hoxo, I was always working on multiple roles for multiple businesses and trying to, recycle candidates, make sure I could get them to different places. I never sat there for a year and just focused on one brand, right? So did you find that? Well, how did that impact your actual ability to do the job?
I think my first in-house role, I still had that kind of agency mentality of all the divisions. I saw all the different departments and divisions as separate companies, but it was still one business. So I was going out with one brand, and therefore I found it so much easier, but boring, because eventually you start to realize that the complexity of your business, whether you're selling a SaaS solution, a product, pair of shoes, a digital service, it's kind of repeatable. It's the same. You're selling the same product. And then eventually, if you're business curious, you start to go, well, if we're in a downward market, retail was tough. I worked in the retail industry for a bit. Like it kind of did affect you, and it affected the internal feelings towards talent acquisition. So I think for some people, it's like a welcome relief because you can focus your energy. Context switching is probably the hardest thing that any human can do. Especially in recruitment, and like it's the biggest challenge that we struggle in our current agency model. But I personally thrive when it's like multiple businesses, and I think that's because I just enjoy the different aspects of what businesses are made up of.
Right.
So I kind of eventually, I think I realised that I couldn't probably just work in one business and be fulfilled, and probably because I love talent acquisition. I love kind of the creative part of the funnel. I've always been kind of like focused, like, why don't you become HR director, or why don't? And I was like, I don't want to do it. It's not a passion of mine. I couldn't think of anything harder than transitioning into all the shit that comes with having to manage that full process. And experience it as a business owner. It is a lot of legal requirements, and I think I've always just been so excited by like the marketing, the talent acquisition piece. I'm quite happy to pass that part, and that's where you got to then work with multiple businesses to get the variety, the interest.
So you spent 6-7 years in-house, various companies, and you suddenly get to a point in your life where you're like, you know what, fuck email, I just want to turn my computer off and do something completely different.
Yeah, I think what I realized is I was always that person that would look to. I'd be the annoying person in a meeting that everyone's like, just shut up. Why are you asking this question? Why can't you just leave it alone? Like, we're okay with that system being really like average. Why do you have to make it better? And I think, I don't know if you've ever heard of like Kaizen or always looking for things that you
Continuous improvement, right?
Yeah, literally incremental, little tiny things. And I love it. And I suppose when you're working in a cost center internally, you've gone from working in a business where you're making all the money to then you're costing all the money. I was just there internally, constantly chipping away at things. And because I loved my space, I wanted to do more. I wanted to get budget. I wanted to spend money on like marketing, career sites. And anyone who's working in-house, you can realize that those budgets just get tighter and smaller. I got to that point where I was like, I'm going to have to look for a new challenge. I'm going to have to move companies again for that to really happen, unless I want to wait 3 years. And I'm too impatient, probably is the inherent recruiter in me. And I was like, I'm going to go and do something wildly different. Like, I've traveled for a good like chunk of my life. And I thought that's where the coffee shop, like, I'll create a brand. I loved it all. All these kind of online businesses were popping up. I thought, how do I bridge, I love Strava and the kind of fitness community, coffee shop, Shoreditch, beard, something's got to happen. And then I was like, I'm just going to leave my job, nothing to go to, and just take that time to think.
What was your life like at that point?
Comfortable. Lived in North London, and I think this is the problem. It was comfortable, and I couldn't cope with it.
Did you have much responsibility though? Like,
no, like
no kids.
Long-term girlfriend, no kids. That's kind of happened since starting the business, which is again probably the backwards way of doing it. But yeah, like I had that freedom. We could have moved anywhere. We could have travelled. So I think I've always been a big risk taker. So at the time, I wasn't worried about like paying the rent. I saved up quite a lot of money. Didn't own a house, decided not to at that point. So I think I had a lot of freedom, financial freedom and personal freedom to just make my own choices. So I had a long notice period at my company, and I thought I'm just going to hand in my notice, see what plays out. And I thought the coffee shop was definitely the thing. I thought I'd have a coffee shop in Crouch End. I'd be with all those, like, you can imagine the types. And I just was like, it's just an idea. It's definitely not going to be what I want to do. And what happened was I got approached after I said to a couple of my people in my network, who are like old mates and colleagues, I'm going to be available. You got any like project work to just maybe fund the coffee shop? And luckily I got given some really interesting gigs for like digital transformation projects. Come in, we need to build a talent strategy. We have no idea what we're doing. We need to hire 100 engineers. There was the M&S digital project at the time, which has kind of gone roller coaster up, down. We're going to build this amazing app. We're going to can the amazing app. We're going to hire 200 engineers. We're going to let go of 200 engineers. And I was lucky enough to basically just get a shoe-in with my network for these projects. And actually, I was working like 2 days a week, 3 days a week, getting paid twice as much as what I was in my full-time job. Most people, again, should go, that's great. Be content, be happy. Not me.
No.
I had hair at the start of all of this, and I've lost it, and it's gradually kind of turned my head's upside down and compensating it with the beard. And my inner like curiosity and passion for what I did just sparked again. And I got introduced to entrepreneurs, VCs, smart people who basically reignited my passion for talent and working in a company that you genuinely believe in. And that was stemmed from, I got introduced to basically Jam Jar Investments, which was a portfolio, which is the ex-Innocent founders. And they invest in just some of the most incredible businesses, like really early stages, but Deliveroo, Tails.com, which is a pet food subscription business, early stage investors in like Graze.com. You get to meet a handful of those companies' founders, and it just makes you realize how amazing it is to have purpose, passion, and excitement for what you do. And it just reignited it for me. And
and the coffee shop wasn't as passionate.
It kind of is. I just realized that maybe I wasn't done in the talent space, and like that's where this kind of like, what could I build if we look at something that maybe is different in the recruitment agency space? And so I kind of looked at it and I thought, after doing some of the consulting roles, I looked at the problem statements and went, what am I not getting in-house? Why did I never consider going back to an agency or consider working for another agency? And I'm kind of basically trying to build something that bridges the gap between, because I definitely think there's multiple models that exist in the market.
Yeah.
And I don't think we've seen any
of
of
talking,
them.
like 2016?
2016 was when I was consulting.
So that's when the likes of Talentful just hit the scene.
Yeah, so
And
Talentful with Phil and Chris, Elements had been around since like 2009, and they were really like focusing on the whole kind of scale up subscription on-site recruitment model.
Yeah.
And I remember like having great conversations with them about the model and what they're building, and it was energy, it was great. I was kind of looking at it from the other side going, what about like the marketing angle of recruitment and employer branding? And how do you basically give tools and knowledge to companies to do it themselves? So very much more like a go in, build processes or support information, and almost allow them to self-serve. That was kind of like the first idea.
Yeah. So how did it evolve?
Is
that where the name Create and Adapt came from?
Do you know what? The name was the referrer, the person who said, are you available to start something as soon as you finish your notice period? She was like, you need to start like Monday. Hadn't even registered a company at this point. Me and my mate, who's a really good friend, he's a head of creative at Mulberry now. I was like, relied on. I was like, let's come up with a name. Let's come up with like why we're going to do this, the logo, branding, and we basically just sat in a pub for like 2 hours and thrashed out loads of different ideas. Very literal of what we do, but it is exactly what we do.
But it sets such a Create and Adapt gives you such a mental. It almost creates like a little bit of energy in your head, if you know what I mean. Like Create, Adapt. It makes you think straight away, new and movement.
I think the main philosophy that's kind of almost continued and propelled us is that it's just never content as well. We're not looking to be like full-time outsourced partner for 5 years. We're not looking to try and replicate Alexander Mann's RPO. You know, it's not that. It is about the uncomfortable feeling of let's move this forward. So
4 years ago then, you get out of the pub, you got a good name. What was the next thing that happened?
So we did... I had the consulting project. M&S Digital was one of the big ones. They were scaling a lot, and it was a case of like figuring out what made me happy. It was really like a self-discovery year. That was like not I'm gonna build. I literally had no idea that 4 years on this is where we're gonna be. It was a case of I'm doing this to fund my coffee shop.
Yeah.
And the more I kind of got into it, and the more then that I started to like explore things, self-discovery and all these kind of bits, spoke to other people, they're like, you've got something. And like I said, meeting way smarter people than I'll ever be, entrepreneurs, almost a term that I hadn't even really been exposed to massively in my life. I just kind of saw corporate CEOs or startup, but like SMEs, you know, like kind of people who run a shop or something. This whole kind of like VC startup ecosystem, just hadn't been exposed to it enough. So as soon as I started to meet the actual founders, I kind of just had shared passion for everything that they got excited about. And I think purely chance and maybe a bit of kind of perseverance on my part, but just really kind of edged in to that ecosystem and loved it.
So what actually happened then?
So by the work that we did, and I've always kind of had a big passion for digital, we meaning it was me and people in my network that kind of just said, you're available, come and help us. I kept getting introduced and referred. And what happened was I got introduced to companies like Tails.com, met the founders. They were like 5 or 4 ex-Innocent founders and ex-Amazon, early stage Amazon people. And they just said, we've got these problems. Can you help solve it? Yeah. And at the time, there was no product. There was no like defined solution. It was more of a case of we want to solve talent problems.
Right.
And it was going in, and basically what would happen is I'd go into a company, 20-person business or 100-person business, and they'd say, recurring thing, I'm pissed off with agencies. They aren't listening to us. I'm sick and tired of spending money, and then the candidate leaves 3 months later, not sure where it's going. Our processes are broken. We haven't got any systems. Do we need employer brand? What does that even mean? Is it just a gimmicky word? And all I kept doing was then going in, kind of simplifying this stuff, being referred to the next company. It felt like literally auto repeat. Not in the same way that it's like literally I could just cookie
Was
cut
there
it.
a few things you always would do then?
It's just diligence. Like, it really is just going in and building like systematic frameworks that went, check this, ask this, don't assume anything. And you kind of always learn and iterate, like the whole Kaizen thing.
Yeah.
But I just I'm just like a bit of a dog with a bone. I just don't accept it when one person says one thing. I kind of got to ask 60 other people. And so we just were so curious in my perception of like why they did what they did, that kind of led to solving some really interesting problems for them, like automating through their ATS, or if they didn't have an ATS, put an ATS in.
Yeah.
Like people don't know what they don't know, right? If you're a founder, you start out, if you've never known how to find a new office, it's like the most exhausting thing to think about. And if you Google any of this, it's even more exhausting.
Because there's too much there.
And basically Google's like its own worst enemy now. So we just took that and just went, at that time, I was like, I'm onto something, right? I'm just going to ask smarter people than me, what would you do? How would you productize this? And I very much focused on building like systems, processes, and selling it as a service with a view that we don't actually do the hiring. Because it was like, give them all the tools.
Was it still just you at this point?
Yeah, give them all the tools, give them all the knowledge, and then I'll kind of roll out.
Yeah.
Because it's the interesting stuff for me. I was like, if I just get into hiring, I might as well just be a freelance recruiter and charge twice as much. And then what happened is I got to the point where I was getting like just referrals left, right, and center. And I was like, oh, if I save up enough money to pay for someone in business account rather than my personal savings, I'll just hire someone. And then I persuaded somebody who used to work for me on my old company to come and join me. And we just kept doing it. And I was like, right, well, how do we then continue to repeat this? And ultimately, that solution that we started with wasn't scalable. It was completely impractical because basically it was trying to build like an Accenture consulting model, but with like shoestring budgets, no consideration about like how do we hire lots of people, training. It's that classic like entrepreneurial mind of mine that was like, don't think about the building, just have an idea and then everything else will follow.
Yeah.
When I reflect back now, it's like I would have put all that stuff in place. I would have documented everything. I would have like structured it so differently, built in somebody straight away who comes in and wants to build the process because it's not my strength.
Yeah.
Like literally builds through energy and then sort of allowing me to step away from it.
To interject, like, I mean, I'm quite similar in that way. I mean, I've probably got more interested in process as I've owned my own business.
You have to, don't you?
Yeah, but I still think I'm not the guy. Like, who was I talking to the other day? Some guy was showing me this tech platform, and I was like, really cool, but you're wasting your energy on me because I'm more bothered about what it does, and then someone else can look at it who's better than me. Do you think that's quite a common trait for recruiters in general, and not just entrepreneurs, that because we're so results driven, we're so like process is actually the most important thing, but it's something that we're just constantly thinking about the end product and the bigger picture?
I don't know. I think there's so many different like personas, archetypes, whatever you want to call it, in terms of who fall into recruitment. And I think that's why I'm saying like there's so many models that are available to how we service talent acquisition. I think there are some people that I've worked with who are in agencies who are incredible at process, but they are awful at selling. And yet they may work in a role that still requires a 360
But they're
approach.
rarely the founder. From what I've met, like you get the odd one, but usually the founder is either joined by someone like that, but without the visionary, the guy who's going to go out and just hang out the window, it doesn't tend to move very fast. I don't think.
No, and I think it depends on, like I've seen it more often that they go and build a tech platform as the founder, and there kind of tends to be more of like, I'm going to solve the solution by not doing it the traditional agency sense. Because they're methodical. I think to build product, you have to be super methodical, and you have to know your user journey without talking to them. So therefore, they have to digitally interact with the. So you have to be over-indexed in some ways, but not. Yeah. I don't think that's kind of like there's a written rule, but I think by association, the traditional training model of joining a recruitment agency firm was like Bill,
get on the phone.
So whether we like it or not, we've kind of bred that persona, and therefore probably the people who go and make successful recruitment businesses are the ones that can show that resilience. They probably have more extroversion because they're going to win at all costs. So it's more kind of like, is it circumstantial of what's required to be a good recruiter? But I don't know. I've met so many. Like there's a guy who always comes to mind, and he's kind of working with us as we're scaling out some of our solutions. And he was a tech recruiter. And he is so methodical, but he runs his own kind of like platform, I suppose now. But he was like a top biller. But I'd say like he's a proper process guy. He's not the sort of person that wants to stand on stage and shout about stuff. But he kind of probably gets more excited about the process.
Right.
But yeah, I think more often than not, recruiters that I see that do well in the industry for like their own startup business, they tend to have extroversion.
100%. So you get to the point where there's something in this now. You've got multiple clients.
It's all inbound. Yeah, it's all referral.
It's all referral based. What happens next? Are you making money at this point?
Yeah, everything's so always profit reinvestment. So any sale, it's just money that goes back into the business. So at that point, we're at a place where it's like, let's build something that can then be iterated without us having to do it. So the whole idea of like subscription services. So it's like 2017, we talked about how do you build a subscription model? Why? It takes away, it's almost like the modern temp desk is how I define it, right? So you're basically wanting to build security for contracts. You're wanting to build better relationships with your customers, so you're not basically forgotten about knowing that you've been briefed on 5 jobs and they only care about it when you've got a CV. That relationship just feels so backwards because, of course, the customer's never going to really care about what you're doing until you've got a profile. So we were just looking at all the different problem statements, came back to the kind of conclusion of subscription. It's about transparency. It's about giving them ownership of data. And this was prior to GDPR being a big thing, but we were like, what's broken in the industry is that you have a price based on a CV introduction. But they didn't like it. We just took 200 people that we interviewed and said, what's your biggest frustrations? And these were basically people hiring.
Yeah.
So we built a model that was low price, supportive and kind of like process, technology led, using third-party tech, not wanting to take on the cost of building anything ourselves. Let's just go. We launched, Charlie HR featured us to mainly kind of the startup ecosystem. We positioned ourselves as almost like that Spotify for hiring, pause, stop, no long-term contracts. And you know what? We got it wrong. So many times. Month after month, we were learning, iterating.
So what was I still don't get what it is you're giving them. If you're not using your own tech, what is the subscription? What do you get?
And that's the beauty of this, right? So a lot of people think they have to have something that's totally unique to solve a problem in recruitment. Go to the average company and ask, did they have an ATS? So you just look at a segment of, they don't have an ATS. We implement the ATS. That solved a problem for them because they were using email, which is the most inefficient way to track recruitment. So it's like, there's a lot of like, we set them up as if they had an internal talent function without the cost of having to hire an internal talent function. That makes sense?
So you give them the processes and the systems.
So we took big company thinking, applied it to agile ways of working and just said, here is really simple cost, like I suppose cost-centric but affordable to that target audience, and here are the channels that are going to work for you. But we did it in like packaged it in a kind of marketing way, which made it look good. But we didn't own any of the tech. We just helped implement it, and then they paid a subscription for us to basically manage like candidate funnels. So one of the biggest disconnects that a lot of recruitment agencies have is they don't have visibility of the whole pipeline, because a company might be having candidates coming in through applications, other agencies. We just took that away because our subscription plan meant that we don't own any of the data. We'll just do the processing. So we will manage agency apps if they're still coming in and they're relevant. We'll manage direct apps. And it became like a virtual in-house recruitment model.
So you're not doing any of the sourcing?
And then, this is the bit. So when we started to sell the proposition without it being heavy on recruitment, we were like, we'll put the process, we'll do the systems. We won't be your like recruiter. So that way we charge lower fee, and it was more about we can scale it by hiring like maybe more like administrators and people who could train to learn the process. Got it wrong there. Reason being is you're basically trusting good agencies, you're trusting good candidates to come through the pipeline, and it doesn't matter how good the brand is and how well we market it. Same with, it doesn't matter how well you market a recruitment agency if their jobs just aren't attractive or
they're not picking it up.
They're not on the right channel. You've got to do the headhunting. And so, pricing low and looking at mass and scaling, it's just not possible.
Yeah.
It just wasn't possible because it wasn't an automated solution.
Yeah.
It wasn't like building a tech piece. And that's just where we realized it's a lot of manual work, not very rewarding for the team members to develop them. And actually all the companies at that point, because they loved all of the consulting and the project work that we did because we nailed that. But the actual like baseline subscription stuff of like maintaining their hiring, it just wasn't working because we needed to basically get more involved. So after about a year of feedback, trialing, iterating, we kind of just went, we probably need to take more active involvement in this and actually do the recruitment, which it wasn't that we fought against it. It's just that we didn't think we'd have to go down that route. And we 100% did.
I can see it though. Like I can see both sides why you would want to do that, because it's like hands off. It is a process driven business, but you're so reliant on other people, just so reliant. Whereas, and also as a buyer, if I was buying that service, I would be like, you're not solving the full problem for me, especially when I'm at a certain size. Like, because I've still got to get someone to administer it, or I've still got to get someone in my business to be chasing your administrator. And I can see why there's pros and cons to it.
Yeah, and it relied on the business being a certain way. It wasn't scalable on lots of different types of businesses. So certain founders we worked with were brilliant, and they trusted us because it was just the way it worked. But then, as soon as that founder was more skeptical, or head of talent or whatever it was, it just made it way harder to manage. And doing it, we did it all virtual, so we were fully remote. We wanted a fully remote model. We wanted to look at modern ways of working, the whole future of work. And then you realize again, it's just not as easy as it. People say, yeah, you can do it, but actually when you're trying to train skills that most people haven't got, or train recruitment basics, you can't do it remotely. And it's all those things that you learn as you've iterated your model, going, well, why am I fighting it? So we had all of our customers kind of saying, we love working with you, we love all this stuff, and the systems work, the process works, we want to fill the job. And it just kept coming back to that. Great that you can make our career site look better, great that you can go and build a event plan for how we should showcase at an engineering meetup or whatever, but actually, can you just help fill the job as well? Oh, and by the way, we'll pay you like 100 times more than what you're charging per month. And we were just like, shall we just stop fighting this and have a look at it, building it out our way? And so I think in 2018, it was very much a big shift, which we just said, we want to build an integrated agency model. Let's trial it for good kind of 12 to 18 months and look at different audience sizes. And ultimately what happened then was immediately like seismic shift, growth, companies that we were just amazed wanted to come and work with us, like Universal Music, Cobalt Music. We had companies like Starbucks, and then we had all these amazing startups like HelloFresh that were scaling rapidly in London.
Is it just the tech teams, or would it be
everything? Sales, marketing, ops, and it was very much, we positioned ourselves as the generalist because of the way the business had started as like almost like consulting. Not doing hiring. We almost like had that already. We had a generalist skill set. And then that kind of allowed us to just win these incredible projects. And like when I look at the roster of customers, it isn't, I look at it and I'm like, that's just sheer luck. But I don't believe in luck. So there's got to be something there that we've been able to work on international projects. But the problem was, going back to then 2018, was this was all organic. We still were 100% relying on referrals. None of this was, I think Create and Adapt, my biggest learning was that we always just sat on the fence with our customer group. We always sat on the fence with the full service we were offering. And it was because we kind of wanted to have data. We wanted to prove whether there was market validation for this way. And all the way, like having good relationships with other people that were doing it in a very, very focused way, like Chris and Phil at Talentful, and seeing other businesses launch and even focus further. So like ones that focus now purely on design and UX and just go, we embed ourselves, it's an embedded talent solution for that. And we weren't really bothered by the competition per se. It was more like, how are we going to feel confident when we're ready that we know that this is the product we're going to sell? And I think the biggest thing that we learned was when working with like a 2,000 employee headcount business, the requirements of the project were so widely different to a startup of 40 people. But they still negotiated the price and still wanted to, like, the pricing was still like completely.
So who would you prefer to work with, or did you?
Like for me, I think everyone has incredible experiences of working for both. I think where my passion and my energy naturally lies is probably because of that entrepreneurship startup. Like I love hearing people's stories. Sometimes you just don't get that, you know. But that said, I feel like where we've got to is that there are so many amazing problems to solve in large organizations that are despondent with kind of we've got a PSL, it's not performing, and they don't really know how to solve it. And that for me is still equally a fascinating problem. And that's kind of one of the things that we've, I suppose, developed. And that's kind of led us to being in a much clearer place getting into 2020 about where we're at.
What does the business look like in terms of headcount?
So we're now at a point where we're 25 permanent heads with a portfolio of like partnerships, I suppose, with freelancers. September last year, we made a strategic decision to basically fully launch into our on-site model, which focuses purely at startups. That was in demand of having loads and loads of traction, worked with some of the best AI, like fintech, biotech, health tech, all the different things that are going on, and the team loving it. So really understanding what the proposition is. And we have built a 360 embedded talent solution for startups that are probably at that earlier stage. So seed, they've just got maybe £500,000 worth of funding, all the way up to probably, if you capped it, 100 people headcount. And we go in and solve how to build out going from 10 people to 50 people. Again, same thing, subscription, fixed pricing. In some cases, people actually say, could we pay slightly less and we'll give you something on top? Delivery bonuses. Like, the price actually isn't the thing that is the fixation, it's how good you're going to be at delivering the service. And that's a blend. That's tech, sales, marketing, customer ops, everything in between. That's Candor.io. That launch, that's going to have a digital solution that sits behind it, because our customers are driving that they want a login portal. They want something to be able to track what's going on. We've got lots of things in the roadmap about what that could look like. But that is unapologetically targeting and speaking to early stage startups. We launched that in September. We've had more inbound inquiries and new customers sign up in the last 6 weeks than we did in the previous 6 months.
Yeah.
Because it's just so focused. We've got 8 live jobs at the minute, and it's bonkers to think about it, but some of them have been open for like a week or 2 weeks, and we've had like 400 applications each per, like, and we never got that before. And I think that's what happens when you find focus and you talk to a specific market, and then you're talking to a specific candidate group that want to join that.
Yep.
What that means for Create and Adapt is that we've moved to a smaller group in Create and Adapt of like 5 people who are incubators of ideas and working on very specific projects for enterprise. So we've got still big customers that come through, but it takes a certain sort of skill set to deliver on those projects. And we're going to be building that business out, but probably at a more strategic pace, because the skill set that we're looking for is very specific. Whereas Candor, we probably would see that being, anywhere between 50 to 60 in headcount by the end of the year.
So is Candor now the focus on the startup community?
Yes.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So Create and Adapt is the enterprise, or is that a second brand?
Enterprise, right. Yeah.
Okay. So you've mentioned a few times you've messed up. Like, you've been pretty open. I like that, because one of the things I've had a few people on this, my listeners have said, can you tell us some stories where people fucking failed? I was like, if it makes you feel better, yeah.
Yeah.
But what you talked about getting product wrong, and when's been a moment where you thought, fuck, I've really dropped a clanger. Like, this is like, this could be it. Like,
I'd say every day. It feels sometimes when you're when you're building something from scratch, it can feel like every little decision from the start is the biggest decision. And my biggest reflection point 4 years on is that time is it's the kind of it's kind of like underrated in just sometimes allowing things to play out. Mm-hmm. My impatience kind of persona and my way that I want things quicker than they're probably naturally allowed to kind of happen, and my expectations of others being so high that it can fundamentally force things to fail around you. And that's played out in multiple ways.
Can you remember one moment though where you were like, you got on from work or whatever and you're like, this is a real shocker?
I think
I'll tell you one of mine, right? We were maybe a year and a half old. I think it was summer of 2018, and we'd built quite a large team. I think we got to about 17 headcount, but we'd staffed it with quite junior members of staff. So we had like 4 or 5 graduates and a couple of people. And we brought this one person over from overseas who came into a strategic role, and it just wasn't working. Like we were trying to head the business down one way, like inbound, and we were coming across to our clients in a completely different way. And it was my decision to hire the wrong people. The fact is, it sat with me and Amma. But it wasn't just affecting the external perception; it was affecting the internal perception as well, because people were really confused. So there was a lack of clarity, and this mission we were building was kind of. It took us like a year and a half to build this momentum, and then felt like it was lost in 2 weeks because people were like, we did this vision day at Indeed.com. We sat down and it was like, what do we do? And literally everyone in the room said something different. I was like, we fucked it. And I went home and I said to Amma, we literally put so much noise and energy in this marketplace, and we did the opposite of you. Like, we went out marketing day one, and some of our team don't even know what we do. And so then we had to claw that back. But I just remember that day being like, I was like, oh my God, like, what have I done? I should have gone back to recruitment. Like, seriously, like, should have gone back to my old job. It really, really hit me hard, and I'll never forget that feeling. Yeah. But it also, when you then get to a position where you've cleared that up, which we did about 3-4 months later, it felt even better.
It's interesting because I think I can remember a point where I felt like probably at my lowest of running the business, but I also don't think it's because of an individual example or moment. It was probably accumulation of things that had happened that I hadn't dealt with, right, or had been able to solve, and therefore it felt like everything was imploding around me. And it was probably 2 years ago, Christmas time. I remember just wanting to just be like, this is not worth it. And not worth it meaning felt like I was working more hours than was humanly possible. I was a very, very happy, healthy, excitable person at every possible thing. I'd kind of done the London Marathon in 2015. This had all kind of started. And before I knew it, I'd reflected on just kind of what had happened and what business I'd built. And we'd hired really good people, but it was just not working. And I couldn't actually put my finger on it. Why was it not working? No one was helping solve that question. And I felt very alone in that point. And I remember probably relying too much on my amazing other half, who God knows why she's still there, but she is. And she agreed to marry me, all these things, God knows why. And it was like I was laying into her about all this stuff that I was dealing with that wasn't going my way. And I'd never had that in my life. One way or another, in my career, shit has fallen into place, and I feel lucky for it, but I always felt there was something, it wasn't happening. But yet, everyone around me was like, this is great, yeah, as in you're building something brilliant. It almost felt like it was positive without really knowing. Yeah. And I couldn't put it down to one thing until probably what I now feel 2 years on from that moment. Not too dissimilar about kind of hiring junior people, but I'd hired people to do a job. When you're building a business and you're the only person building the business, it is so exhausting, of course, yeah, so mentally draining. and I had no idea what I was doing in terms of running a business. So how dare I have expectation on people to come in, do a job, get paid a salary to build a business? To your point about the vision, we've always got this kind of like really powerful statement of revolutionizing the recruitment industry. But were we really living it by hiring people who were doing a job and they weren't necessarily getting anything else out of it? So I think by the way that we had set up the structure and the fact that I'd hired through profits, hired through building through like very steady cash flow streams, I tried to do it sensibly, and not thought about like, is this going to be fun? Is it going to be a reality? I think I automatically like failed myself, let myself down, and ultimately let the business down, because it wasn't the company that was the vision in my head. It was a substandard outsourced recruitment service that we weren't getting right.
So how did you snap out of that?
How did I snap out of it? I probably got a big old slap from Sophie, my other half, and like, you can do this type moments. But I think that Christmas was the kick. Like, that was the moment where I probably felt the lowest I've ever felt in my career, and I've never had it. I've never really had that experience, even through recessions. All those, like, it never really happened. And I spoke to just lots of people who had maybe gone through something similar. And what I did was ultimately change what was going on. You know, bring in, that year, we brought in people who are still with us today and are fundamentally the reason why we've built the business the way it is. But you can't underestimate it's not about hiring the right people always. It's about knowing what your product is, what your product fit is. And they've just been able to laser focus that.
Yeah.
And I've realized now that when I'm at my lowest, it's because I've probably taken off more than I can chew.
Do you know what I was just going to say?
And I feel like I can't get out of it, right?
I was going to say that when you, as a founder, and it's your brain, it's your thoughts, you get involved in everything. And I feel some days so overwhelmed that, and I'm worried about stuff that I shouldn't really be worried about, because I've hired people that are better than me at that. So that's why they're fucking there. But I've got to empower them to do it and to really, but you're scared they're not going to take the pressure and run with it maybe at the same pace you would. So it's this kind of yin yang balance. But oh my God, the overwhelming feeling of being a founder and worrying about everything, as opposed to, once you can start to see one area move without you having to push it along, you think, fuck it, what would it be like if I could get all areas moving?
Yeah.
And then you're just
beautiful feeling.
Yeah, then you're just playing.
The other part of it as well is if you give too much responsibility, because somebody comes in and they're absolutely amazing and you think that they're like the best thing, but then you give them way too much too soon, and you can kind of see the fact that it's quite hard to expect people to know how to kind of retract from that.
Yeah.
And they look for you to kind of sometimes give that guidance. And I think I've just got so much better now at, especially in the last 6 months, just understanding when it's okay to like prompt people and like giving them that hook that says, feeling like you got a bit too much, right? How do we, and not judging them and not accusing them of not being good enough. Like, that's never been my case, but I've realized that people aren't able to do that on their own, like, because they fear of the consequences. And I think for me, I've always been like, probably thought like I had like good level of EQ, but until you run your own business, you realize, oh my God, like totally awkward was like, just people want to do a good job, don't they? That's like the normal thing. There's just so many different facets. And I think I just didn't, because I've got probably some issue around, we did an offsite thing last week where we really got to understand our personality profiles. And I haven't done that for a while since probably working in a large organization. And it just unearthed all those things that I knew about myself, but probably hadn't been facing into since starting this, which was like, I hate rules and authority. I'm not somebody who can cope well with routine. All these things that probably I've been trying to fight because I've been given job title, you run a company and all of a sudden you're the CEO. I've got a clue what I'm doing. Yeah. Every day. It's hope that I talk to smarter people every day who's going to help me get there. And I think what I've been lucky enough from that experience 2 years ago was to show vulnerability, to show like that you are human, and people will support you in that. And then it just decompresses that kind of feeling that you're always getting it wrong, because we get stuff wrong all the time. But the thing that I love about the culture we've built is the total acceptance of you're never going to lose your job if you fail. You're never going to be accused of being crap. It's going to be, how do we get better? What can we do to support that? And I get that more than anyone. I've got people who literally call me out on stuff all the time now, and that massively helps.
What is a day in the life of your business? How does it structure? Because most recruitment agencies are quite similar in the way they set up. They're early starters, they're late finishers, it's high volume, get on the phone. Probably not as loud as sales floors as people would like them to be, but they're quite similar. Some are more face-to-face, some are more telephone-based. Yours sounds like some people listening wouldn't even be able to imagine what it's about. So what's it like?
So I'll focus on, so for a typical talent partner working in Canada, your week is made up of almost milestones. Monday is all about how can we hack away at what we're doing to make it better for everyone in the company, and then also our community, so the whole customer. The biggest problem you have in most organizations is that you've got lots of people probably doing exactly the same thing and not sharing it. Our whole thing is about Monday, Canada Collab. How do you basically share what's going on across every customer to basically roll out economies of scale or solve multiple problems at once? Put 20 heads together, hopefully you get a better output than one. So that's all about team like collaboration.
Or via video or face-to-face?
Face-to-face video. We typically have start the week together, end the week together. It's working well. We're building out like more remote teams and stuff. So, video dial-in. It is hard to balance totally remote workers with then a 20-person office, but we need to get better at working at that. So that whole day is like setting your week up. It can be difficult because if you're the sort of person who sits there and goes, I just want to get smashed in the phone, it's a mindset shift. And we help people go through that as part of their onboarding with us. Tuesday to Thursday, you are either on site with your customer, you're working from home, you're building out projects, you're talking to candidates, you're thinking about, we need to hire 16 people in 3 months at this department for this scaling startup. How are we going to do it? Rather than, which is the norm of what most agencies get, you get a job brief, you start working on the job. There's so many different facets, like have we got the right recruitment process mapped out? What things could go wrong? And so it's more a collective consideration of like, how do we solve the hiring requirements over a longer period of time, rather than just thinking we're only as good as the last job we filled.
And then once you're through these meetings, everyone's individually then working within are they on site?
On site.
Always on site?
Like I said, on site 1-2 days a week, depending on kind of what they're...
Would it always be one on site, or do you sometimes build teams?
We have got like a squad model. So basically we'll always have a customer lead. That customer lead will then be supported by other people that are almost area experts or genius zone experts. They will be the people that kind of will maybe have some FaceTime, but it won't be frequent, because then the customer kind of starts to expect it. So one customer lead, they agree with their customer when they're going to go in. A lot of it is built on trust, which is basically the hardest thing in our sales model. You're basically saying to someone, give us X amount of money up front, here's a team, and we'll start working on it. Not too dissimilar when you hire someone, but it's just that psychological commitment of going, I hope they're good. I trust that they're going to do the work.
That's kind of what the Hoxo model is quite similar in that way, because we work with recruitment businesses like progressive agencies that think, I want to build my business on brand. I want to be famous in the market. I want to be niche. Like you say, word of mouth's great. What happens when we run out of word of mouth? And actually, we don't want to sit there cold calling people all day, every day. We like working with clients with disruptive models and alternative pricing and all that, but still, we put ourselves in a bracket that you're getting a 5-man team, very similar. Account manager is like your squad lead, and they have behind them they have a graphic designer, videographer, copywriter, and a paid media expert. So it's like a complete team at a similar price, really, to hiring one resource in your business. So it's like, but still hiring one resource in your business 5 days a week, it's just so much more like traditional, and it's something that everyone's done. So for people that have never worked with anyone in an outsourced capacity, it's just so that you can see their head moving. Like, it makes sense logically, but then they're like, I still want someone sat next to me. Do you find that as well? Do you still?
Yeah, and I think we embrace the variety. I think this is where I go back to my original point. Like, there's so many models that should exist in the world because of companies that love the future workplace point, which is like, if everyone was working remote, then that whole idea of someone sitting next to you in the office is just not really even a consideration. What you're actually starting to look at is value. So 5 heads for the price of 1 is 100% more value in terms of like what you're going to get, hopefully. The problem is if it's oversold and it's kind of the same, or some cases not, and it's worse, that's when that kind of skepticism starts to creep in. So that's where the process part of a business has to be slick and it has to be great. And we get it wrong time and time again because we make assumptions that it's all right, and then actually a new customer comes on in a different style of working. And
you're always adapting.
You have to. And I think the challenge on the sale is when you've got 29,000 plus recruitment agencies in the market, you know, I don't know if you know the percentage of how many run a fee on success model. It's quite high. I imagine
Probably
it's
like 95,
plus,
98.
right?
Well, I know 81% are sub 10 staff. So 81% of recruitment agencies, sub 10 staff, sub 1 million turnover. So there's only, and then I think the next stat is something like 17% are under 5 million or something like that. And it's literally like between 3 and 5% break up. So you're talking about the majority are boutique independents who have small teams and have
maybe it's a lifestyle business or it's a personal interest in wanting to do it. So there's no kind of real interest to disrupt it because it's almost like I want to pay the bills. And great, like do a great service and make sure it's good. But when the market then, and we talk about timing, if the market is only experiencing that and 0.1% or whatever the market is experiencing this other way of it being done, you have got market adoption challenges. You have to educate. You have to do thought leadership stuff.
That's all I've ever done.
Yeah, and like it's like when we have inbound leads, we convert pretty much majority of them because they've been referred by people they respect or smart. As soon as we're now starting to look at a sales strategy and you're going to build your funnel and you're going to start talking to people who have never heard of you, inevitably you're going to have a much higher rate of dropouts.
100%.
But we'll learn. We'll understand. And
so is that the next phase now?
Yeah, and I think for me, the biggest thing is to kind of excite the fact that we need 100 more businesses doing this sort of model and potentially models that don't even exist today. Whether we look at the pricing, whether we look at the partnership model, whether we look at like we get so many recruiters applying saying, I am disenfranchised with sales recruitment. I hate the idea of a person is a commodity. But the industry is the biggest it's ever been. It grew by like 11% last year. So something's obviously going right somewhere, but it still doesn't mean that people are happy in it. So I feel like there's got to be more and more people who go, how can you... I always use this example of I was at a dinner and we were going around the table. I was 28 at the time or so. Just got this the big new job, working for an amazing big group, like international role. I was really proud of myself. And went around. What do you do? Architects. What do you do? I'm a doctor. And what do you do? I work in marketing, strategy stuff. What do you do? I just said I'm a recruiter. And it was almost like immediately.
Oh, underwhelmed.
But almost like I'd done something wrong.
Yeah.
Like a real stigma that associated with it. And I kind of, it did just immediately go like, why? Like it's one of the most valuable roles that you provide.
Flip back to any of their roles and go, well, how do you build teams? How do you build business? What's the most important people? It's the people, cool. It's crazy. It's crazy.
So I want to, the big thing for me, my whole passion and drive and continued, like I don't think if I didn't have continued drive for it, I would have, that whole point of that Christmas, I'd have just gone, this isn't worth it. But it's the whole point that I think there's just so much value that we can bring if we just really continue to understand what value means for our customers. Even if they're paying you 30% fee on success, what is value in the start of that process to the end? What more value could you bring?
Yeah.
without a lot more sometimes work. Sometimes it's just transparency.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just saying, oh, do you want us to use this third-party tech, an app that you can track all the candidates? You don't have to go and build an app, which is what everyone immediately thinks. There's about 400 white-labeled apps you could probably go and use to do it.
Yeah.
So it's just thinking a bit smarter about how do you give your customers a really good, transparent experience.
So what would you say to the army of recruitment agencies that are about to launch that are going to do exactly what they've always done?
Like, my biggest thing is why? Why would you do it the way it's always been done? If it's for money, can't like, kudos. But just my view is like the highs and the lows of that, we all know what it feels like. Is it satisfying? Is it long term? Is it really what you want to be doing? And reach out to people who are doing it in a different way and just literally absorb everything about how they're doing it, ask as many questions as possible, and just then take a step back and go,
could we do that?
Am I going to do it the same way, or could we do it slightly differently?
Well, even if you think about the nature of starting a business, if you do just spit out of the side of an agency, create a new name and do exactly what you've always done,
which happens
that is
way
basically
often.
what the industry is. It's just it's a complete spiral effect of the and look, that was what I was about to do, right?
Yeah.
It was only till I looked into building it via brand because of the restrictive covenant that made me think about this whole marketing piece, and then I got obsessed with it. But if you do that, you are genuinely just thinking, your USP is almost just you, isn't it? Like it just falls down to your network, your individual knowledge, your ability to take what you did there and do it again slightly better. It's really limited. And I think personally, the only way you can grow in 2020 and beyond, if that's what you're going to do, is by just being super niche.
Yeah, you
it's
have
just
to
the
be.
only way. Like you can be a bit more general because you've got a different alternative price point service. But I'm like, imagine trying to get into the door with a CEO of a business by saying, I do exactly what I've always done, just on my own. Like, it's not that easy. Whereas if you can go in and go, look, I can genuinely save you X% of spend on recruitment, or I can genuinely save you X% of headcount, or I can offer you something that I know for a fact you're not getting. As a CEO, well, again, title, but as a leader of my own business, it is really, like I said, it is interesting. You're always trying to solve problems. So if you can actually think about, and I think one thing you mentioned before was like, when you are on the agency side, if you've never worked in-house or had your own business that's not a recruiter, I'm not sure a lot of the industry have ever got close enough to the business problems. They're always really interested in the fees and the service, but are they really thinking about what that candidate's going to drive in the company and the net effect to the business and everyone's jobs and the economy and all these? They're not, and they don't have to be, because they can be really good at understanding skill sets, requirements. But if you can get in at that level with an organization, it's a different game. It's a complete. If you can think about if someone comes into me now and says, I want to help you hit your next 2-year projections and I want to take care of so many different things, like, that's a conversation worth having.
But let's also take it to like a really clear business level. Whether we like it or not, government's changing on contractor day rates. Temp desks were heavily reliant on business valuations and recruitment.
Yeah.
Permanent placements are a harder business valuation. You need to think of a different model if you want to grow a business to have a solid business valuation. You need exit or growth.
You need monthly recurring revenue in some way.
Monthly contracts. You need something that stabilizes your business and makes it attractive to basically grow. If you have a growth trajectory, if you have an exit plan, or to even invest it or get outside investment, it's going to be really, really hard. And we have lots and lots of people who I have messaged me, and I'm running my own thing. It's not going quite how I want it, and I can feel it. I can sense that it's kind of like when the highs are high because I've just all of a sudden got 30K's worth of fees. You feel rich. When those lows are lows for like 3 months, or you doubt everything and you worry you can't pay the bills, and it's just hard. And I think for everyone that then launches a business in recruitment and goes, it's so like easy now to launch. You could be sitting in Bali with a laptop and a phone, website, everything live in 24 hours, and basically just start messaging people. There is no barrier to trading. But that's the biggest problem with it, right? And so I think there is this urge that we all need to look at when
it's
we
the biggest problem, but also the thing I love about it the most as well. Like
create so much
the
varied.
entrepreneurial nature of it is it's unseen elsewhere. Look, we're running out of time, Matt. I guess you strike me as a super intelligent, super kind of, like you said, curious person, inquisitive. Like, what do you do in your spare time to keep yourself moving forward? Like, forget just the day job. What are you doing to better yourself around that?
I had a baby girl 8 months ago, so like nothing at the minute. I am relishing sleep. I am relishing being a dad for something that I wasn't prepared for. Probably I didn't realize how selfish I was with my time prior to her arriving, and it's great. It's given me so much more perspective. So I really value family time way more than I'm not really like a big fan. I'm not like someone who like craves going and seeing like my family all the time and stuff, but it's created that. So that's my downtime. My vice is I need to work out. And that was prior to then having Frankie, my daughter. I was religious about running, working out. Running is my kind of meditation. So running is the thing that allows me to decompress. It allows me to actually create. So I realize when I'm running, a lot of people kind of go, when they get into flow, you just start to have these thoughts, and I do. I wish I had a notebook, or I start to write audio record things. As got with my watch now, and half of them are nonsense. But just getting out of my head is so healthy, and I think I probably read a stupid amount of stuff on non-recruitment related news.
So all right, so then give me 3 books you've read that you would recommend my listeners would read.
So
audio or hardback.
I think one before all the controversy came out was A Million Little Pieces by James Frey. I don't know if you know it.
No.
Fascinating story of like how a person can basically go to self-destruction, and what that looks like, and how you rebuild yourself from it. Sapiens is one of my favorite because of the philosophical aspects of it all and the history that sits behind it. And then Phil Knight's Shoe Dog.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites.
It's probably the most inspiring because I love his story of bootstrapped, borrowing from the banks, going and pleading with them.
It's an incredible story.
And just the sheer determination he had. And the way he went about building it, pre all of this, like you can go and borrow 100 million quid and it doesn't matter if the business fails. Like he was doing everything on his house, as have I. And it's really, you've got to be prepared for that journey. And I think it's just given me a whole new level of respect for what he went through.
It's incredible. You look at Nike trainers a bit different. Who would you say you would follow on somewhere like LinkedIn now? LinkedIn is becoming the mecca of news. It's becoming the kind of Facebook for recruiters and business.
Is it? Is that what?
100%. I mean, people spend more time on LinkedIn now than they ever did. And it's.
Do you think they enjoy that?
I think it's becoming more of a place to go and, just laugh at things and comment on things. And as opposed to back in the day, it was just sourcing candidates and putting up jobs. Now it is becoming a place where people, like the amount of memes about Mourinho and the things that you never saw 2 years ago. So I follow people for sometimes humor. More often than not, I follow them because for inspiration. But who would you follow on LinkedIn, or who would you say on LinkedIn people should keep an eye on that put some good stuff
it depends. Like if your listeners, I assume, is kind of going to be very much around recruitment or like wanting. I can't say there is anybody, unfortunately, from a recruitment angle that I kind of feel excited or motivated by reading, listening, or seeing. Specifically for LinkedIn, I think one of the people that I'm always impressed and inspired by his posts is a guy called Alex Stepney, who's the CEO of Beam.
Okay.
And Beam is helping basically if you're homeless, most people can't get back into employment because they are unable to fund it, can't get skills, and he's basically created a crowdfunding platform for homeless people.
Wow.
So it's all about helping that proportion of people in society get a job. And the way he talks about his vision, the way they're building it, it's a not-for-profit, but it it's ran in you can tell it's ran in a very commercial and inspiring way. And how he talks about the recruitment space. Yeah.
All right, we'll keep an eye on him. And final question: what's the future like? What would you see in a few years for your business? Where's it going?
I thought it was going to be really like
Elon
Musk type.
No, I'm not quite high level like that.
I think for me, there's kind of a handful of things that are super important to us. The culture we've built is ultimately what makes us. It's not me, it's not my vision. I believe that the people we've got in the business have helped build a company that is so unique, and I've never been part of anything like it from companies I work with. So retaining the great ingredients, knowing when to let go of some of the stuff as well, as we scale, that's going to be like the biggest thing. How do you retain that culture, which is why people have joined? But things are going to have to change. As you start to add 20, 40, 60 more people into a business, it's natural. So I think retaining that is the biggest thing. We're rubbish at marketing ourselves, so we need to get better at that. We need to understand how we position ourselves. We still rely heavily on like inbound activity. A lot of it is inbound leads. So we want to make sure that we are sharing thought leadership activity. And on that, we probably want to help people who are really passionate about, if they go, I've listened to this, I really would love to build something, but I have no idea how to get there. I've done it. I've gone through, got the scars, lost all my hair along the way. I want to help people if they really believe that this is something they would want to start. Like we're not going to set up like a franchise model or anything like that, but it's a case of, if people want to do it, there are definitely methodical things now that we've learned that I'd love to help educate and support people.
All right, so if there's a recruiter out there who's thinking, definitely want to start an agency, I'd like it to be different, I've listened to what you've said, I like the thought of it not being a replica of my current engagement, you'd be open to having a chat and finding out more?
100%. And even if it's a case of like completely disagree with what we're doing and how we're doing it, but it's like the concept of want to do it differently.
Disruption.
There's so many different ways that can be done. Pricing models, niche. That is what drives me. That is what the excitement is.
So you're open for anyone to reach out and say hello and ask questions?
Well, hang on. How many people are we talking to at the minute?
It's about 6,000 a month at the minute. So
yeah, I'm like we like I said about the applicants. I was looking through our ATS last night, and I was like, I pride ourselves on wanting to make sure that we're responding to people. Like our internal talent team can't cope with the amount of people, but I'm chipping in. So there might be a caveat of.
Well, I hope you get bombarded, but it might not be as big as all 6,000. We'll see.
Well, even 5 would be good.
That'd be great. Well, Matt, thanks so much. Really appreciate it, mate. And another episode of The Rag Guys. That's another very unique story, very different story about growing a recruitment business in a completely different way. As always, I'd love you to share your thoughts on this episode. If you're on LinkedIn, put your comments under the posts, put your own posts out there. Share the fact that you're listening to The Rag with people. I did get a guy on the phone today from Scotland who said someone WhatsApped him saying, you've just started out listening to this podcast, and then he messaged me and we had a good chat. And do you know what? That's what it's about. It's about sharing it so that as many people can listen and learn from people like Matt and others who've already trodden the path. As well, if you're on the iTunes store, please do give us a 5-star rating. Put your comments in there. It helps us reach more people, which is what the main aim is. I'll be back again next Wednesday with another story of unique growth, and I'll see you then.